Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome back for another episode. This is Frank Agin, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections. I appreciate you tuning in, sharing this with others, just being part of the conversation. Today, I want to talk about, I always talk about networking, but really giving ourselves credit, giving others credit for what they may have unleashed in our lives. Unleashed, not a great word, but they've kicked over these dominoes that just kind of go on and on and on. And no doubt you've done it. Hopefully I've done it. But I want to share one particular story with you to kind of illustrate the point. Recently, I got an email from a friend, somebody I had met, a little over a year ago, more than a year ago. It was probably in late 2019 that we had originally met. I guess that's almost 2 years ago now. Kimberly Rice. And Kimberly Rice, if you look her up in LinkedIn, you'll find that she does a number of things. She does a lot with women empowerment. She has worked with law firms with respect to their marketing. She has got a series of podcasts. And I don't want to get into all the things that she does. She does a lot of things, and they're unique things. She's unique, and that always makes it somewhat easy to refer her. I always joke that if somebody's just kind of plain vanilla property casualty agent, my mind really can't latch onto that. But Kimberly's one of these people that does unique enough things that when I come across other people, I can say, hey, you need to talk to Kimberly, or let's get you on Kimberly's podcast. Well, that's what happened is somebody came into my life who I am interviewing on the podcast, and I thought, you need to be on Kimberly's as well, so I made the introduction. It was a good fit for Kimberly, as I thought it would be, and her response to me was, wow, thank you, this is great. How can I help you? I really want to help you. I really want to understand how to help you. And I appreciated that, and I kind of sat on that for, to be honest, about 10 days. I told her, listen, let me get back to you. And I don't know that, I still haven't really appropriately answered that question for her. To be honest, I'm busy. I meet lots of people. But what I did tell her is, listen, I appreciate the gesture. I appreciate the thought. And not everybody will reach out and have that thought. But that's not really the purpose of today's episode or the topic. What I wanted to share with her is what she had done for me. And I think a lot of times we lose sight of it. I think she had no idea what she had done for me. But at any rate, probably about 18 months ago, she introduced me to a gentleman by the name of Scott Mason. Scott Mason was on this podcast. Scott Mason has his own podcast called Purpose Highway. Scott and I have talked. He's given me people for my podcast. I've given him people for his podcast. I have a lot of fun interacting with Scott. We're both busy. We don't really catch up often, but when we do, it's a fun conversation, and it's good to interact on LinkedIn. So, kudos to Kimberly for introducing me to Scott. That was awesome. At one point, though, Scott, like I said, he introduces me to people. He introduced me to a young woman who is out in San Francisco, and she's also been on the podcast. Her name is Sejal Thacker. Sejal has an amazing TEDx video on bias, and look her up, Sejal, Sejal, Thacker, Thakkar. But she was on the podcast, amazing video. It's been fun interacting with her as well, and just kind of introducing people. And again, she's got kind of one of those unique backgrounds, or unique. There's so unique to what she does that really kind of has a unique point in my mind. Just it's easy to kind of hook on to other things, and okay, it's not just vanilla, hey, I'm a property casualty agent. Sorry for all the property casualty agents out there. There are a lot of you, and you tend to all do the same thing. Anyhow, no offense. So Sejal and I have been back and forth and back and forth, just, not necessarily conversations, but email exchanges and who you're looking for and how's it going and stuff like that. And I've tried to connect her to people, and she's tried to connect me to people. And again, a good relationship, much like with Scott. And now, mind you, Kimberly set that in motion because she kicked over that first domino. So at one point, Sejal introduced me to a gentleman by the name of Brian Bashan. And Brian has also been on this podcast. See a theme here? Great people. I get them on the podcast. Again, that's not the point of this, but it's just kind of, I guess, coincidental that a lot of these people have been on the podcast. Not all of them, you'll see. But Brian is, again, listen to that episode, Brian Bashan. Amazing individual. He started out as a Catholic priest, spent years as a Catholic priest, as the chief of staff for the Cardinal in Boston, and that brought him to the White House, to the Vatican, to Wall Street, and then he was involved with development work for the American Cancer Society, and a $2 billion campaign for a medical school in Canada. Before that, he was development officer for executive director for I believe the New York University Medical School Foundation. Anyhow, interesting person, and again, lots of back and forth, lots of, hey, would you be willing to meet this person? Would this help you? So on and so forth. And it's been a wonderful thing. And so at one point, he introduced me to somebody, a gentleman by the name of Simon Town. And Simon, guess what, has been on this podcast. Simon's unique in that he's over in the UK. He's 5 hours from London. When we hear the UK, we think, okay, London, somebody living near London. No, it's like not everybody in America lives in New York City. Most of us don't. Simon doesn't live anywhere near London. He's essentially 5 hours northeast of there. He lives, lives on the coast. At any rate, Simon is one of these people who is just a connector. He just likes connecting people. He has a day job of helping people with physical therapy sorts of things, but he engages in lots of calls and introduces lots of people to him. So when Brian first introduced me to Simon, I'm like, okay, what is this? I mean, I'm going to be meeting somebody in the UK. What does this all mean? And Simon has connected me to all sorts of wonderful people in the United States. I can't even remember everybody, and they've not all been on my podcast. Some have, some great connections with respect to that, but it's really kind of exploded my world. Mike Verrett was one person that truly comes to mind as just a good connection, who's out in Rhode Island. So he's stateside. I have a call here in about 90 minutes with a gentleman who heads up a not-for-profit in the United States. So Simon has just been wonderful to help me with a lot of the initiatives I'm trying to do with the Charitable Roundtable, which is a networking group, a free networking group, a monthly gathering of not-for-profits that I've been instrumental in putting together over the last 5 or 6 years. So at any rate, the point I want to make to that, and the story is obviously to be continued because it just keeps going and going and going. When Kimberly came to me and she was like, really, thank you very much for what you've done. You seem like you've done so much for me. What can I do for you? And I could just kind of sense in her words that she felt like she was somehow letting me down. And I responded to her and I gave her that whole narrative. I didn't type the whole thing out. I didn't record it, but I just said, you know what? You have got to give yourself credit. If you could see my world, if you could see all the things that are going on, I am just literally overwhelmed with calls, and calls with great people, people who are putting me in touch with other great people, people who are learning about the types of things I need, people who are helping me not just be on this podcast, but promote this podcast, promote my 1 minute podcast, help me with my networking initiatives beyond AmSpirit Business Connections, but also helping with that, introducing me to potential people who could be franchisees in the organization. And I told Kimberly in that call, I said, you need to realize, or you need to, you basically walked through my yard and dropped an acorn, and you need to come back and see the mighty oak that it's grown into. You need to give yourself credit for what you have done, because a lot of times we don't give ourselves credit for the things we've done. And hopefully in your world, there's somebody like a Kimberly Rice who just comes walking through and drops an acorn, and walks away. And I guess in the terms of Dr. Rob Bell, who I have had on the podcast and who I've quoted from his book all the time, he's got a wonderful quote in his book, "No One Gets There Alone." The name of the book, the name of the particular chapter, is "Planting Trees You'll Never See." And it's basically doing things and just kind of walking away and not expecting not expecting to see the fruits of your labor, not expecting anything in return, just planting those trees and just knowing and trusting that they'll grow. And essentially that's what Kimberly has done. And hopefully you have people in your life who do those things for you. But more importantly, hopefully you're willing to do those things for other people. Making introductions, and they don't always have to make sense in the moment. Me being introduced to Simon Town or me being introduced to Brian Bashan didn't necessarily make sense in the moment. It was hard to see what it meant. But you just take the time, and part of it's a leap of faith, saying, I'm going to have a phone call with this person. I'm going to see what it is that I might be able to do for them. And knowing that you might not figure it out on that one call, but just getting the sense that, okay, I know this person. I've gotten to know this person. I like this person. I trust this person. I'm going to get a little bit of information as to how I might be able to help them, and then taking it from there. And we all need to be that person who is out there, I've just kind of coined this, dropping acorns, planting seeds. And knowing that something's coming from that, and we're not necessarily going to be privy to all that it is. And I've had people, another person I think of, Mary Jenkins, who's been on the podcast. She runs a charity, and she has said to me, wow, you have done more for me than my whole board has done for me. And I'm like, I don't really understand what you mean. I've made a couple introductions to her, and I really need to sit down with her and really understand how that mighty oak has grown. How that the little acorns I've planted for her, what those have done for her. So the point of this, with respect to planting acorns, planting seeds, or whatever metaphor or analogy you want to use to it, is one, recognize the efforts of others. Really stop and take a hard look at, oh, wow, I wouldn't be in this situation but for this particular person. I wouldn't know Simon Town but for Kimberly Rice. I wouldn't know all the people that Simon has blessed my world with but for Kimberly Rice. And just understanding that there are people out, that people have done things for us. And it would be easy to look at Kimberly and say, well, gee, she's only made one introduction for me, and just leave it at that and kind of dismiss her. And I think that's true of all of us, is that we can look at just the surface of an introduction, or the one thing, but what are the ripples? What is that acorn that's been dropped? What has it grown into? That's the key. Is to really have gratitude for those sorts of things, and then be the person who's dropping acorns, making introductions, and just kind of moving on, knowing you'll never really know the full extent of what it is you've done, but having faith that it's done something. To wrap up, just to remind you, we are looking for individuals to become part of our franchise opportunity. At AmSpirit Business Connections, we are looking for franchisees. We are essentially, what we do is we help small businesses and professionals connect to the people, information, and opportunities that help them become more successful. And we do this through a membership-based program. And we're selling franchises. We're teaching people how to basically have this organization, basically own their piece of this organization in their neck of the woods. If you know of somebody who would be interested in this, or if you're interested in it, please reach out to me using the email in the show notes, or if you want to connect me to somebody, go ahead and email them and copy me on the email. That would be great. Through this franchise opportunity, you'll make more money from an increased number of professional contacts, because you can continue doing what you're doing, or whoever can continue doing what they're doing, but you'll be able to also make money as you build those professional contacts through our franchise program. Have a great day.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.